glad to have you here today. Paul is going to share his story with us, but first let me give you a proper introduction. So Paul is an Army combat veteran who served in Afghanistan, and he's a former member of the 3rd Brigade Combat Team, 10th Mountain Division. He was one of the speakers at the Rhode Island Department of Health event Owning Our Story about the overdose epidemic, and he was speaking with the Creating Outreach about Addiction Support Together team. So Paul's here sharing his story with us about overcoming addiction. You're in recovery now. Congratulations on being sober.
Thank you.
And thank you, of course, for serving our country. So we had your dad in here a couple months ago, so it was great to talk to him. We had Anna Bess with Coast in here a couple months ago as well, so now we're happy to have you here in studio as well.
Full circle.
Full circle, right? So wanted to have you in here today to share your story. Not only are you out there talking with other people, doing public speaking events, but you're living your life as well, going to school. So you're doing a lot of things. Why don't we start off by hearing a little bit about your story and the recovery process and your journey on healing?
Well, I grew up in Taunton, not too far from Providence, but I started using like a lot of kids. Found prescription pills in a family member's home. Started very small amounts, just taking them on the weekends, and it grew and grew and grew. And then I had to step up my usage because I started getting used to the smaller amounts. And before I knew it, I was at a orientation for a job one day, and I started feeling very achy. Legs couldn't sit still. My legs hurt. I left and went and met a dealer, bought a Percocet 30, broke it in half, and as soon as I placed it on my tongue, it all went away. And I remember thinking to myself, like, that's it. I'm an addict. And it's just, I hit the ground running. I finally got clean in 2010 because I wanted to join the Army. I felt like there was a way out for me, so I joined the Army, clean. Deployed in 2011 with the 10th Mountain Division, Charlie Company, and came home different, as most combat vets do, and I wasn't ready. I didn't want to come home. It was a very turbulent time, and I didn't know how to deal with this new pain, this new stress, being here when my friends aren't. You know, I lost 3 really good friends, Tobin, Contreras, and Jeffries, and then just a litany of other friends, a list of other friends that have lost limbs or something has to deal with it, and I wondered why me. I wasn't good enough before to live a clean life and attribute anything to society, so why do I get to not be dead or maimed? And, the Army had there was nothing else for the Army to do for me or me for the Army. I went home and I tried to numb the pain, and that took about 2.5 years of heroin, being broke, losing jobs, just doing everything I could to survive. And thankfully, my father forced me to go to the hospital, the Providence VA, because I had infections due to injection, which is very common for addicts. And I was there for a week and a half, almost 2 weeks or something. And Lynn Dion, who saved my life, if she's watching, I love you, Lynn. She never gave up. She just wouldn't take no for an answer, and she got me into the methadone program, which I'm weaning myself. Well, I'm not, but the medical professionals.
You're doing it,
yeah,
though.
The medical, yeah, exactly. So I'm with my medical team in Causeway, Boston. We're weaning off of the methadone now, and I'm in school. It's my last year. Looking into graduate programs and doctoral programs, and I'm feeling things again that I hadn't felt in years. Feelings, when you get clean, you have feelings that you didn't feel for that whole time, and it's an odd thing to go back to. But I'm happy every day that I'm here. I have something to give back, and that's what I'm doing.
Well, congratulations to you, and like you said, every day is a new day.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk a little bit, what I think is so interesting, something that you said to me, is that you're fighting the stigma, you're fighting 2 stigmas. It's almost like two battles that you're dealing with. It's the stigma of being a combat veteran, and then the stigma of being an addict, a recovering addict, I should say. Talk to me what you mean by that and how that's different than what maybe just a regular person is going through.
Well, one thing about the recovering addict, I'm always an addict. The rest of my life I'll always be an addict, but it's that active or recovering, and thankfully I'm in the latter. But going through life as just a combat veteran alone is tough, because you come back and you have this feeling that the world doesn't want you anymore, and the saying that everyone loves a soldier until he comes home and stops fighting is felt by all of us, and it's a lonely feeling. And then you add on an addiction and the numerous things that come with that: depression, anxiety, then the PTSD from the war, and it's just a concoction made for someone to feel lonely and ostracized from everyone else. I mean, it's that feeling of being alone in a crowded room. It's what every day is for us. And so having as I've come to term it, the battle on two fronts, it's the perfect storm of self-destruction. And instead of just relenting and just giving up, I've found strength in a lot of different ways, and that's the biggest thing for me and for a lot of addicts and veterans and combat veterans, disabled veterans, is to find something that gives you purpose again, like we had when we were overseas. And it's I've heard it referred to as the siren song war, and how I talk to my brothers about it all the time, that we miss it. We miss Afghanistan. We miss that. And when you leave, you don't have a purpose anymore. And so I found my purpose in psychology, in school, and in doing this outreach work is where I find my purpose again, because I know I can contribute something that I didn't think I could. And thankfully, I'm winning that battle on both fronts.
I think that's so powerful to be able to say finding purpose, and I think that message has such a broad outreach, especially since we're going through this epidemic right now. Talk to me a little bit about what that's like for you. We'll stick with the veteran issue. It is so hard to know that people coming home from serving our country don't feel like they're welcomed, or don't feel like they have a sense of purpose. That has to be I can't imagine. That has to be so devastating. What's your message to people dealing with that issue just alone?
We all have our personal hells. Everyone goes through something that's we don't know each other's stories, and it's kind of walking on eggshells, in between walking on eggshells and being curious about asking questions, unabashedly. You need to find a good medium. It's people are gonna bring up bad memories. Bad memories are gonna come up, but not everyone is against you anymore. The enemy is there, not here. And people dealing with combat vets, patience is a big thing, which most people just dealing with anyone is you gotta be patient. But with us, it's something different, where we will come back to who we used to be. Some of us need a little more help. Some of us don't deal with the same thing, deal with things the same way as everyone else. But you just have to bear with us and understand that you don't understand what we went through, which is a weird thing to say you understand. You need to realize that the bond I have with, McCafferty or Greg or Jay is a bond that we won't share, and it's tough for loved ones to realize, but it's true. But if you empathize and you show us that you care and you're there for us, it makes us feel at ease and able to communicate with you. So
let's talk a little bit about your recovery. So you've been sober for 3 years. And what you've said is that you have to have a goal, you have to have a purpose. How do you think that message can be sought for other people that are going through this, trying to seek that journey of healing, that recovery part themselves? If there's people out there that might be watching this that have a loved one that are struggling with addiction themselves, how important was that for you to have some type of purpose?
It's the one thing that's gotten me. For addicts, the what's it? The devil's hand in the idol. I can't remember the saying, but
Yeah.
it's
I know what you're talking about, but I
bad
can't
to
think
be
of it
bored.
either.
That's about it. It's for addicts. It's very bad. Being bored is, your mind just starts getting to you, and you start thinking about things that you used to like, or when you're an addict, you know that this product has ruined your life. I mean, just without question, heroin and opiates ruined my life because of, that addiction. But when we're bored and we're thinking about it and the urges come up, we don't think about that bad. We think about the feeling of being high. And so I found very early on that if I occupied my mind constructively with school or writing or exercise, for some people, I don't exercise. That's beside the point. But I found my thing. My thing was going to school. I go to, 4 to 5 classes every semester, and I push myself because it's something I found that I was good at. If you have a loved one that's struggling, after, they've gotten through the process, they chose to get clean, which is a big thing.
Yeah.
Is that you can't force them to get clean. They have to get clean themselves. So when they finally do that, one thing that is very important is to remind them of things that they like to do, or make them go out and try to experience things. It's so easy regardless of your problems or no problems, it's so easy to fall into yourself and just not do anything. Saying no is a lot easier than saying yes, or in some circumstances. So if you're there for them, if you try to remind them of things that they like to do, or just try to expose them to new things, it helps. We spent so many years or decades for some people doing our own thing where it was so self-destructive. Like, I do woodworking and whittling and stuff too, and it's because it's creating something instead of destroying. In the Army, you create this team and this beautiful bond, and then you deploy and you learn how to destroy, and it's so hectic, everything's crazy, you're going and going and going, that when you come home it's odd to be quiet. And so learning to deal with being quiet and bored, that's the biggest thing, is learning it's okay to be bored, it's okay to be sad. Those are things that it comes a long way. But
The mental health aspect of addiction is something that our society needs to learn. Mm-hmm. It's a long way that we do have to go. I want to talk to you about the importance of educating people about the disease of addiction, and how we talk to adults and young people differently. And part of what you do is public outreach, is talking to people about addiction. And you said we need to talk to people differently about the disease itself. What do you mean by that?
We've all been through DARE programs when we were kids, and in 4th grade, the cop comes in, and in the old commercials, at least in the 90s, it's
the egg.
Yeah, it's your brain not on drugs. The drug. It fell on deaf ears for a reason, because it was boring, and it was just like, okay, older person, like, I get it, they're bad, but you're just talking down to me. I was a rebel as a kid, and fighting back and everything. So if you said anything to me, I was gonna go against it, because that's just the way teenagers are, and that's not going away. So talking to kids, especially, where I think is the biggest issue, is relating to them and understanding that if you just say no and no and no, this is all bad, they're gonna push back. It's in our nature. So talk to them like they're an equal instead of like a child, or talk to them, yes, there's a reason why I started doing drugs. I didn't do my first drug and then my life fell apart. There's aspects to drugs that are appealing to people, but the end result is what destroys lives, and making that choice. And I spoke at a high school, I think South Kingstown, last year, and I told them, yes, drugs, people take them at parties and they're fun and all this good stuff, but if that means you're going to ruin your life, potentially die, hurt everyone you love, is that really worth trying to find out if that drug is worth it? And it's not. Take it from me, it's just not worth it. And I think talking to people like they're not stupid. And I think a lot of medical professionals will just talk down because they have a degree, and it's not how we need to communicate anymore.
Yeah, what do you say to kids when because you're going out and you're speaking to, I mean, we should say, I don't want to say kids because, 17, 18-year-olds, they're not they're not kids anymore. They're doing things. And drugs out there, they're not, I mean, you could be smoking marijuana and it's laced with fentanyl, which is terrifying. So, or there's people out there that are taking pills that are also laced with fentanyl. They think they're taking maybe a Vicodin that they get at a party and it's laced with fentanyl, and then that's it. Or they could be taking pills from their parents' closets and medicine cabinets, whatever. And then, like you said, that's how you started. You were taking medication, and then it led down the road to heroin use later on. What do you say to kids when, I mean, what's the message if you're getting questions and that kind of things? Like, what's just the harsh reality? Like, look, you don't want to do this. I mean, what do you say when that's what you're dealing with today, right?
I mean, it's especially in today's age where it's just everything's there.
Yeah.
You can do anything, and it's like, okay, I can literally find out anything I want. Well, I can't feel something, so why I should feel it? And I always was that, let me try this, let me do this, and when I tell my story, I usually get into the very bad things that happened to me, or the fact that I had to go to a hospital and be admitted for almost 2 weeks. The fact that they couldn't find a vein on me, so they had to go through one side of my chest, and then they realized that I was so desperate, I used a vein in my neck to administer the drug, and they couldn't go through my chest on this side. Like, that's what drugs do. I mean, I am 3 years ago the end result of that just wild experimentation. I mean, there's people like me and a ton of other great speakers or great people who I look up to that can tell you this is what it's like. You don't have to actually experience it to know that it will ruin your life. And a lot of kids, it's gonna go one ear or the other. I was that kid. It's just we have to find our own. We have to make our own mistakes in life. But there are kids who can listen to us, and it will affect them if they've seen it in someone they can relate to. I'm not some suit or somebody walking around with a diploma like, say, I know what you're going through because I have a diploma from X, Y, and Z. Like, that's not it.
But you are getting your diploma, and with the efforts to eventually help others, which you already are helping others, which I think is absolutely fantastic. So, like you said, senior year and getting your psychology doctorate. With hopes of furthering your education as well at UMass Boston. So just having to deal with a little Boston traffic along the way.
Yeah, that's that'll make anyone drive to drink or use. But hey, we all go through it. Right?
So, Paul Kandarian, thank you so much for sharing your story with us here today. We really do appreciate it. If you're interested in more about Coast, I will have a link on the website, and we really do appreciate you sharing your story with us here on GoLocal Live. All right, everyone, we're going to get set up here for our next guest on GoLocal Live. Hang tight.